Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to break down the monumental, decade-spanning story of Brady Corbet's epic film, The Brutalist. We're going to map out the deeply moving journey of an immigrant visionary trying to rebuild his life and his legacy in post-war America. We've got a lot of fascinating ground to cover, and we're going to break this sprawling, complex plot down so it's super easy to digest.
To keep things simple, we'll walk through the story chronologically. First, arriving in America. Then, the enigma of arrival, the hardcore of beauty, betrayal and ruin, and finally, the architecture of trauma.
Okay, let's dive right into part one, Arriving in America, the Overture.
Now, the story we're about to explore has a truly epic scope. I mean, we're talking about a timeline spanning over 3 decades. We're going to follow our protagonist from his initial arrival in Philly in 1947 all the way to a massive retrospective of his life's work in 1980. Keep this timeline in the back of your mind as we go. It really shows how the different eras of his life connect and how his past is constantly informing his future.
So the story opens with László Tóth. He's a Hungarian Jewish Holocaust survivor and a brilliant Bauhaus-trained architect. We first see him arriving in New York Harbor, catching that iconic first glimpse of the Statue of Liberty. But, this classic moment of the American dream, it's deeply fractured for him. László has been forcibly separated from his wife, Elisabeth, and his orphaned niece, Sofia. They're both still trapped in Europe. So here's a man stepping into a brand new world, but carrying the unbelievable weight of the world he just left behind.
Which brings us to Section 2, The Enigma of Arrival, Part 1.
Starting in 1947 in Philadelphia, his early years in America are, honestly, a brutal downward spiral. First, he moves in with his cousin Attila. Now, Attila has completely assimilated. He anglicized his name and even converted to Catholicism, which creates this immediate, intense cultural clash between the two. Through Attila, László actually scores a job renovating a library for the wildly wealthy Harrison Lee Van Buren. But a misunderstanding leads to Harrison firing them without paying a dime. Then, after some false accusations from his own cousin, László gets kicked out entirely. So, fast forward to 1950, just 3 years later, this master architect is literally reduced to doing hard, manual labor loading coal. He's battling a severe heroin addiction, and he's living in charity housing with his friend Gordon.
But then, out of nowhere, his fortunes abruptly change. Harrison Van Buren discovers that the modern library renovation László did was actually being highly praised by the architectural community. More importantly, Harrison uncovers László's prestigious past back in Europe. So, Harrison pays the money he owed him and commissions László for a massive new project in tribute to his late mother, the Van Buren Institute. We're talking a grand community center with a library, a theater, a gymnasium, and a chapel, the whole shebang. Suddenly, László is back on his feet. He's living on site, employing his buddy Gordon, and Harrison's lawyers are finally stepping in to expedite his family's immigration.
But of course, this sudden stroke of luck introduces some major tension. You really have to ask yourself, what happens when a person's deeply traumatic past finally catches up to their present? How is all that unresolved trauma going to interact with this monumental new opportunity?
Let's find out in Section 3, The Hardcore of Beauty, Part 2.
By 1953, the legal help pays off and the family is finally reunited in America. But this reunion is a stark, heartbreaking reminder of the war's devastating toll. The trauma they carry is both physical and psychological. Elisabeth is now a full-time wheelchair user, suffering from severe osteoporosis brought on by the siege of Budapest. And Sofia, after surviving the Dachau concentration camp, she has completely lost her ability to speak. So László is no longer just battling his own internal demons. He is now directly surrounded by the profound, visible suffering of the people he loves most in the world.
Now, what's really interesting about this next phase is the stark juxtaposition it creates. It perfectly captures the central conflict of this chapter. On one side, you have László's pure, uncompromising artistic vision. I mean, he even agrees to work completely unpaid to cover cost overruns just to protect his design. But on the other side, we have Harrison's harsh commercial reality. You've got hired contractors cutting corners to stay on budget, and Harrison's son, Harry, just openly mocking László. It's that classic age-old battle between art and commerce, but it's heavily fueled by an underlying lack of respect for the immigrant artist.
And this conflict, it sets off a wildly escalating sequence of disasters. László is constantly clashing with the cost-cutting consultants. Then, a massive setback hits when a train derailment destroys crucial building materials, which racks up mounting legal costs. For a furious Harrison Van Buren, this is the absolute final straw. He completely abandons the project,
fires all the workers, and leaves László's masterpiece sitting there unfinished.
This brings us to the darkest part of our story, Section 4, Betrayal and Ruin, the climax. By 1958, the story takes a truly devastating turn. The family is relocated to New York City. László is working a pretty modest job as a draftsman, while Erzsébet is working as a journalist. Zofia has actually miraculously recovered her ability to speak. She's pregnant, and she announces that she and her husband are making Aliyah to move to Jerusalem. Right in the midst of this huge family shift, Harrison Van Buren unexpectedly re-enters the picture. He wants to restart the Institute project and rehire László. But this renewed partnership leads to absolute horror. During a business trip to Carrara, Italy to purchase marble, Harrison violently rapes an intoxicated László. Adding to this profound violation, Harrison verbally degrades him, calling him a societal leech and claiming his people invite their own persecution. It's completely horrific, and the event causes László to totally unravel. He becomes belligerent, he impulsively fires his loyal friend Gordon, and later, in a moment of sheer despair back home, he almost kills Erzsébet by giving her heroin to soothe her physical pain.
When Erzsébet realizes the depth of this betrayal, she takes decisive action. She travels straight to Harrison's home and publicly exposes him as a rapist right in front of his family and his associates. In response, Harrison's son, Harry, violently drags her out before his sister Maggie finally intervenes to help Erzsébet escape. For László and Erzsébet, the illusion is completely shattered. They realize they are not, and maybe never were, truly welcome in America. So they make the heavy choice to leave the country entirely and join Zofia in Jerusalem.
So the crucial point is this. László leaves America a broken man, and his great work seems forever tainted by the monster who funded it. Which leaves us to a fascinating question. How does an artist translate such profound betrayal and such deep historical trauma into a physical, lasting legacy? Let's look at Section 5, the architecture of trauma, epilogue. The narrative now shifts dramatically forward to the year 1980. Decades have passed. We learn that Erzsébet has passed away and that the Van Buren Institute was in fact finally completed back in 1973. We find an aging, incapacitated László in a wheelchair attending a massive retrospective of his entire life's work at the very first Venice Biennale of Architecture. And this brilliantly illustrates the core of the film, because it's here that the true meaning of his American masterpiece is finally unveiled. Zofia takes the stage and gives this revelatory speech. She exposes that the Van Buren Institute contains hidden spatial designs that intentionally mirror the layouts of the Buchenwald and Dachau concentration camps. The structure itself was never just a community center. It functioned as a monumental, physical manifestation of processing the Holocaust. Think about that. László took the money of a wealthy, abusive American industrialist and used it to force the world to physically walk through his trauma.
We conclude this explainer with the chilling final words of Zofia's speech, where she quotes advice László gave her years prior. No matter what the others try and sell you, it is the destination, not the journey. It's a provocative, unforgettable summary of László Tóth's harrowing pursuit of the American dream. He reached his destination, right? He cemented his legacy. But looking at the immense pain embedded in those concrete walls, we have to ask ourselves, what is the true cost of leaving a legacy behind? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep focusing, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.